Grief is a complicated and very powerful emotion. And unfortunately, it's very likely that at some point in your life, you'll go through it. I mean, everyone goes through a state of grieving at some point in their life. And there's different theories about how we process our grief. The theories, they don't differ significantly. In any case, the stages of grief are exactly the same for each person. And some people go from one stage to another quickly, or you may skip a stage here or there depending on your circumstance. And others may get stuck on a single stage of grief and have difficulty moving on. Now, knowing these universal stages of grief and knowing what to expect can really help you deal with your emotions. Once you're faced with your own personal loss and grief, it helps enormously to know what's going on. It doesn't matter, if what you experience is slightly different than the theory. It's going to give you a sense that you're not alone with your pain. Others have gone through this and survived, and so will you. So knowing the stages of grief, it also helps when you're trying to help another person you care for deal with his or her grief. Each stage of grief has meaning, and when going through them, your goal is to process each stage with all its issues and move on to the next until you're able to accept your loss and can move on with your life. And here you'll see the 5 classic stages that affect everyone who encounters a loss of some kind. Now, these are just guidelines, they're not strict rules, but I hope that this video is going to help you move through the pain of your loss, and also hope that what you learn and what you experience will make you stronger. And one day you'll need that knowledge and that strength to help with someone else's grief. So let's talk about the first stage of grief, shock and denial. And this is the first reaction that most people have when hearing the news of a devastating loss. And, frozen disbelief and denial may follow. If someone brings the news to you that someone very close to you has passed, it's very likely you're going to react with this shaken, no, no, no kind of feeling. Your mind is simply not able to process the horror, and it's protecting you by completely denying the reality. You might decide to believe that someone's making a practical joke in some cases, or you might even laugh when you hear the news, the way a child laughs in the dark to dispel the fear. Numbness may follow. It's nature's way of letting you deal only with your emotions that you're capable of handling. And denial, it's really a very helpful stage of grief, but at some point you'll be ready to face the reality. And reality means a range of very painful emotions that are going to follow. There's no rule as to how long you should be in denial. There's no rule that everyone has to go through the denial stage. You might be able to jump straight into highly emotional stages such as anger or guilt. But if you persist in denying the reality of your loss, you do need help. And that help can come from a close friend or a relative who knows you. Sometimes the help of a trained therapist or grief counselor may be necessary. You need to accept that the loss is a part of life and that the pain that comes with the loss will slowly pass. The love you feel will remain, and you'll always have the memories. You need to let yourself continue to grieve in order to reach acceptance, which is the final stage of this all. And only then can life truly go on. The next stage is pain and guilt. Once you get out of this denial phase, the pain's going to hit you with full blast, and it might feel overwhelming at times. It might be very tempting during this stage to try to dull the pain with drugs or alcohol. But pain can be healing too, like the pain of birth. It results in a new reality, the reality of your new life. And this feeling of guilt, it's very common during this stage. It may come from unresolved issues. It can be the guilt of surviving a loved one, especially if the loss you experienced is the loss of someone younger. You might feel guilty for not showing your love while you could, or showing proper appreciation. The excruciating pain experienced during this stage, it may lead to anxiety, especially with, if you're a more emotional person. And while the feeling of guilt will pass once you're able to think rationally, the pain will remain, and it will be part of your life throughout the grieving process and, unfortunately, beyond. But slowly you will be able to function and live with your pain and the reality of your loss and move on. The next stage is anger and bargaining. Your overwhelming pain takes many forms, and it's very common that people feel powerful, a powerful feeling of anger. And this could be anger against doctors who couldn't do any more, or against relatives who did not give more time to you, against God, against destiny. You may ask questions like, why me? How could this happen to such a nice person? Anger is healthy. After the destructive feeling of guilt in the previous stage of grieving, pain leaves you without anchor. You feel totally out of control in your life, and anger puts you back in control. We're trained to control anger from a very early age, and anger gives a practical outlet to your devastating pain. It's very important not to vent your anger to those closest to you. They're also grieving. You need them. You don't want to lose them. You've lost enough already. The stages of grief do not follow each other in the same order for all people. Anger can easily combine with guilt and turn on you. Even when you lash out at others, deep down you might feel that you've failed your loved one in some way. If someone you love is terminally ill, you might try bargaining. You might try to bargain with God or with destiny. You might promise to be a better person, or, stop smoking, or to be more generous, if only. Bargaining is particularly powerful in this stage for people who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And bargaining for your own life can offer hope or a channel for pain that gives more control. As with other stages of grief, anger and bargaining, they can last a short time, they can last weeks, months, or you might skip them altogether. It's important to look for signs of uncontrolled anger, which can irreparably damage your relationships with those closest and dearest to you. The next stage is depression and loneliness. All the powerful emotions that follow denial are exhausting, but they represent hope. Strong emotions are one way your pain shows its ugly face. But at some point, the hope fades and you face the reality, and that reality is devastating. The loved one is really gone. And there's no way to change that fact. That life will never be the same. You are left alone. I know that's upsetting to hear. You might feel that the life you're in makes no sense anymore. Depression sets in. And feeling depressed, it's a normal reaction to a devastating loss. And in a way, if you don't get depressed, you're not really facing your loss. And those around you might have a difficult time seeing you so low. You may hear the term snap out of it. You'll hear it a lot. You may be offered antidepressants or phone numbers of therapists. Your priest, your rabbi, your religious counselor may offer counseling. Your friends may offer numerous casseroles. People try to help where they can, and everyone wants to help get you out of the blues. At some point, you're going to start noticing that life does go on, and the depression, it will slowly start to lift. The pain will remain, but with less intensity and with less hopelessness. And sometimes the depression continues to deepen. You might refuse to fight hopelessness. Thoughts of suicide may be intruding. That's the time when help is necessary. And people who suffer from deep clinical depression that can't shake it or not able to look for help, the help has to come to them. Family members, friends, they need to be on the lookout for the depression that keeps getting worse instead of better, and look for professional help. There's no rule how long you should allow depression to wash over you. Days, weeks. It depends on your personality, the enormity of your loss, and the support you have from those that love you. Alone or together, you need to rejoin the life with all its pain and memories. And don't forget, it will get better in time. Finally, 5 is acceptance. It's the 5th stage, and maybe, this is the goal. This is the end game here. Accepting your loss does not come in a moment of epiphany. It doesn't work like that. It's a slow and painful process, and it is the result of all the stages of your grief. It is the new form your pain takes, the form that will be part of your new life. Accepting your loss doesn't mean that you're through with it. It just means that you accept the death as a part of your life, and you accept that you're starting with the new life, one enriched by the person who was part of your previous life, the life that you will build on the ashes on the previous one, the life that will celebrate the loved one you lost and not mourn. And there will be times, months, and even years after your loss when you will revert to one of the stages of grief for a moment or two. or maybe even a little bit longer. There will be painful reminders which drag you back into the depths of your despair, but they will be rare, and you will be strong enough to deal with them at that point. Holidays may be painful for you because they're going to remind you of how they looked, when you celebrated them with the person you lost. But the stages of grief will prepare you for this and will allow you to deal with this loss in your own way. And this is really only the beginning of understanding your loss and your grief. For the real step-by-step process to overcome your grief, to move on to a more positive mindset, one where you can enjoy life again and love again and be happy, smile, and laugh again, I highly recommend you visit transformgrief.com, where I not only outline how to navigate these stages of grief in a productive and expedited way, but I also show you productive ways to move into a better life where you can feel good and look forward to the day ahead. So check out transformgrief.com right now.